topic for today is types of defense mechanisms. But what exactly are these defense mechanisms? Well, the psychological strategies usually developed by unconscious to either manipulate, deny, or distort reality. They help in protecting your ego, thoughts, and feelings, and they do so by avoiding conflict and anxiety. To be even more precise, according to the psychoanalytic theory given by Freud, due to the opposing forces of our mind, these mechanisms actually arrive as a solution to these conflicts. The forces are defined as id, ego, and superego. Anna Freud defined these mechanisms as unconscious resources used by the ego to decrease internal stress. There are mainly 4 clusters under defense mechanisms: pathological, neurotic, mature, and immature. Now let's get to know about them in detail.
Under the pathological cluster, the first one is denial. One of the most prevalent forms of defense mechanisms is denial. When you reject facts or reality in order to avoid dealing with emotional effects, people in denial may attempt to filter external events or circumstances from their minds. They completely say that this did not happen. In other words, they steer clear of unpleasant experiences. So it's generally known that the expression "they're in denial" refers to someone who is denying reality despite what may be clear to everyone around them. The second one is splitting. So splitting is a technique through which people are only ever viewed as either good or evil, never as a combination of the two. Either oneself or other people can be split. It usually happens in childhood and leads to poor development of the self. For example, something will always or never go right, or someone might always or never love you. Third one is acting out. So when a person acts out, they engage in an extreme action to communicate ideas or sentiments that they find difficult to express in any other way. So for example, a person who acts out can hurl a book at someone or punch a hole in a wall instead of expressing "I'm angry with you."
So let's move on to the next type of defense mechanisms, which is the mature defense mechanisms. Under that, the first one is suppression. So blocking unwanted thoughts or urges by purpose, as opposed to repression, which is usually a subconscious process. In suppression, someone who experiences intrusive thoughts about a terrible occurrence only tries to push it away from their mind, and those who do it are said to be using suppression as their defense mechanism. The next type is altruism. As we all know, altruism refers to helping. So these individuals, by devotedly meeting the needs of others, they manage to solve their emotional problems or internal or external pressures, in part as a means of meeting his or her own needs. They usually indulge in various societal beneficial activities. The next type under mature defense mechanisms is humor. Even if laughter produces no specific biochemical changes, according to Norman Cousins, it accomplishes a very important essential purpose. It tends to block deep feelings of apprehension and even panic, which all too frequently accompany serious illness. It helps free the body of the constricting effects of negative emotions that in turn may impair the healing process. According to Cousins, a 10-minute laughter can result in 2 hours of pain-free sleep. The next type under mature defense mechanisms is sublimation. Our conflicting emotions, unfulfilled wants, or unwanted impulses become a productive outlet when sublimation is a task. So when we have a difficult day at work or we need to unwind, we usually go for a run. A fight with your lover or a friend could also prompt you to resort to producing music.
The next category is neurotic defense mechanisms. The first one is rationalization. So, rationalization is a defense strategy in which people provide their own explanations and justifications for uncomfortable or unpleasant feelings. A person who is declined on a date, for instance, can explain why by claiming that they weren't attracted to the other person in the first place. Another example is instead of blaming their own lack of preparation, a student may blame their instructor for a poor examination grade. The next one is repression. By repressing a memory, feeling, or thought, these things are no longer accessible in the client's consciousness. All of this information goes to the unconscious aspect of our mind. For example, Jacob cannot remember certain painful memories as a child. To protect himself, he unconsciously represses these memories from his consciousness. Instead, he displays anxious behaviors towards other items that he associates with these original painful memories. Next one is regression. So, when problems or conflicts arise at a later stage of development, regression is the return to former phases, that's the lower phases of development, and the abandoned kinds of gratifications that are associated with them. An example could be Freudian slips. The final one is reaction formation. So, reaction formation is a psychological defense mechanism whereby a person unconsciously replaces an unpleasant or anxiety inducing impulse with its opposite, frequently expressed in an exaggerated or a showy manner. A typical illustration is a young male who teases a little girl because he is secretly drawn to her.
Let's move on to the last category of defense mechanisms, called as the immature defense mechanisms. The first one is identification. The internalization or replication of behaviors seen in others, such as when a youngster unconsciously adopts the behavior of one or both of the parents, it's said to be identification. Introjection is another name for identification. Sigmund Freud defined identification as the development of child's perceptible emotional relationship or bond with another individual. For instance, when you first notice that a baby gets agitated when the mother leaves the room and the babysitter is sitting alone with the infant. The next type is passive aggression. The display of aggressive negative emotions such as anger and aggression is known as passive aggression. In other words, those who employ this protection mechanism unintentionally express hostility and non-confrontal way of dealing with things. For example, someone who engages in passive aggressive behavior might appear to agree, perhaps even enthusiastically, with another person's request. The third type, under immature defense mechanisms, is projection. When someone feels threatened by his or her own reach and then accuses another of harboring hostile thoughts, it is a classic example of projection. The last one under immature defense mechanisms is displacement. This kind of self-preservation, displacement is an act of shifting one's unfavorable emotions from one thing or a person to another. For an instance, if someone is upset with their job, they might take it off on a family member or by yelling at them. So with this, we come to an end of this video. We basically gave a brief about many of the defense mechanisms that we often use in our daily lives. So if this video was of any help to you, please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Psychophilics. Thank you.